Good morning, everybody. Now, we have some new figures from the Office for National Statistics about immigration, and it's not good. And these are figures for the 12 months up to June 2023. And what they say is that the population has increased by nearly 700,000 in that time, from 67.6 million up to 68.3 million. And that's all due to net migration, which is for that period 677,300 net. And that disguises the number of people actually coming in, because you take away the people coming out, going back to other countries. You get the net figure. So what that means essentially is we have about 1.2 to 1.3 million people coming to the country in a 12-month period, and maybe 600, 700,000 people leaving. So we get our net figure, the increase of migrants in the country over 12 months of 677,300. So that's an increase of 1% in the population, entirely due to migration. And actually, the other thing that can contribute and normally contributes to population increase in a healthy society is that you'd have more births than deaths, and than of the indigenous population. That's what happens, normally, has happened through most of history. But in the UK, for the first time since 1976, which is 48 years ago now, there are more deaths than births in the UK of people already living here. So actually, migration is contributing to more than 100% of the population increase in this latest period where we have statistics from. And this is already 15 months out of date, because that's for the period up to June 2023. I'm making this video here in October 2024. So if you extrapolate, we're now getting on for 70 million people in the UK, and that's just the official figures. I mean, there are many, many more millions here, I imagine, living in people's back gardens and, unofficially, undocumented, illegally in the country, that are not on the figures that we don't know about, who come on the back of lorries or come through early morning flights and don't actually get registered and counted properly by the people that make up the figures. So I imagine that we're probably well on the way to having 75 million people living in the country already. And the people who really know are supermarkets and water companies and wastewater sewage companies. They know exactly how many people are in the country, because they need to provide food for their customers, and they need to provide water. They know the flow of water. They know how much wastewater goes down the pipes, and they know. They don't release their figures. They're quite cagey about this, as I've said before. But you talk to people, quietly behind the scenes, they say, yeah, there's way more people in the country than is admitted officially by the Office for National Statistics and other government bureaus. But even they are officially admitting that the population increase is out of control, and now it's all due to net migration, and it's going up at a rate which is completely unsustainable. And we talk about a housing crisis in the country, but the housing crisis here is completely caused by massive net migration. You have 700,000 people approximately coming to the country in 1 year. We're not building enough homes just for them, let alone the indigenous people, British young people who want to start a family and buy a house. And the government seems to want to prioritise migrants coming into the country for welfare and housing and benefits and every other thing, and leave the indigenous British people to suffer. I mean, you've got this awful Starmer regime at the moment that's cutting winter fuel payments for pensioners, saving £1.5 billion a year, but then they're splashing out £5 billion a year on migrant hotels for illegal migrants, and that figure is just increasing all of the time. Not to mention housing benefit for the migrants who have been processed, gone through a hotel for a few months, and then have been palmed off onto a local authority, who then have to pay their housing benefit and financial benefits that they can buy food and stuff for themselves. So that's what's going on in this country. The government is putting British people last. And that's what lies behind all of these massive increases in the population, due entirely to net migration of people coming to the country. Now, this also doesn't show the change in demographics in the country, which is also alarmingly being modified at an ever-increasing rate. So here's a couple of figures I've just pulled again from the ONS site and from the school census, which is very interesting. Every year there's a school census in England and Wales where the government looks at how many schools there are, how many pupils are in schools, but also they're obsessed with counting people's ethnicity for diversity targets. So you can actually see what's going on. Now, in the country as a whole, there are 25.6% of people are not indigenous now. So white British only now account for 74.4% of the population. Now, of that 25.6%, some are also white, about a third of them, from other countries like Poland, America, Romania, whatever, includes gypsies and travellers too, and Irish. But, if you take out those as well, then 18% of the country as a whole is what they call black, Asian, and minority ethnic people. So 82% are white, of which 74% are white British, but 18% are black, brown, Asian, ethnic minority. That's in the country as a whole. Remember those figures, because when you look at the figures in schools, which is the younger people, and that indicates who's having children and who's having more children, the figures are very, very different. Whereas in the country as a whole, there are 18% black, Asian, minority ethnic. In schools, the figure is 28%, 10% higher. So there are far, far more black, Asian, minority ethnic children under 18 in schools than in the whole country, than the country as a whole. And if you look at white British, or non-white British, if you like, then the figure is 25.5% in the country as a whole, but 36% in schools. So put that the other way round, in the country as a whole, 74% of the UK are white British, but only 64% are white British in schools. So again, it's 10% lower white British in schools as compared to the country. 64% in schools, 74% in the country. So every year there are fewer white British in schools in the generation coming up than in the country as a whole. And those figures are changing by 1% approximately every year. And you can see that from the school census. So extrapolating that, within the next 14 years, so that takes us up to 2038, white British will be a minority, an absolute minority in schools. And you take another 10 years, 2058, white people as a whole will be a minority in schools, and black, Asian, minority ethnic groups will actually be a majority. So they will have to be called majority ethnic groups by the year 2048, if you extrapolate these figures, because they're changing by 1% every year. Firstly, through net migration, but also because the total fertility rate of women from some ethnic minority groups, Pakistani, Bangladeshi, Afghan, Somali, Sudanese, for example, they have far, far more babies per woman the total fertility rate is far, far higher for those ethnic groups than for white British, where the total fertility rate is very, very low. It's down to about 1.4 now for white British in the UK, way, way below replacement rate. And the same for other ethnic groups that are white ethnic groups, Poles, French, Swedish, German, Romanian, whatever. The total fertility rate for all white ethnic groups, as well as British indigenous white people in the UK, is well below replacement rate, but it's above replacement rate for these groups like Afghans and Somalis, as I've said. So that also leads to demographic change coming through, not just through migration, but through people who have children in the country, who have been given settlement rights here by successive Labour and fake Conservative governments, and they're given the indefinite leave to remain, and then sometimes they're even given citizenship, and they can stay in the country and also build up the numbers in their communities, whether that's by design or just whether it's because people are just getting on and having families. It doesn't really matter what the reason is. The effect is the same. By 2050, there will be an absolute majority of ethnic groups, non-white people, under the age of 18. And of course, by the end of the century, that will feed through to the entire population, will be majority ethnic groups. If the situation continues as we're going at the moment. So this is what these figures show and what underlies the figures, and what will happen in terms of demography in the UK if the situation continues, and we can extrapolate into the future based on what's been happening over the last 30 years or so. So this headline that came out yesterday from the ONS was very alarming to a lot of people, and a lot of people do not want mass rapid immigration to continue, simply because with increasing the number of people in the country every single year, there's not the services, there are not the houses, there are not the school places, there are not the hospital places or GP appointments and dentist appointments available for everyone in the country already, let alone if we increase the population by 700,000 or more a year just through net migration. You see, if the population was only increasing and changing because of the differences between deaths and births, it would be fairly stable. It would go up a little bit, down a little bit, because we have a mature demographic pattern. If you take out immigration, in the 70s and early 80s, the population of the UK was very stable at about 56 million. It was stable at that level for about 15 years. And then it started to go up a little bit. But then when Tony Blair came in, he opened the floodgates to masses of immigration. In fact, some people in his team said, we're going to rub the right's noses in diversity. So this was a deliberate attempt to smash our heritage and change our society through mass immigration, because those people wanted that and didn't ask anybody who actually lived in the country, and they're shielded from the effects of what happens to towns, particularly a lot of northern towns that have suffered tremendously by specific types of crime from specific groups of people. We all know what that is that I'm talking about, things that have happened in Rotherham and Rochdale and so on. So this needs to change. And, I'm the leader of the Heritage Party, and our policy is to completely stop illegal boats coming across the channel. We'll push them back to France to stop that. People who are here in the country illegally should be immediately deported, and we need to come out of the ECHR and any other international agreement that stops us from doing that. Even the UN Refugee Convention 1951, which was written for a completely different time and a different group of people. It was written for to help people escaping from the Soviet captured Eastern Europe. It was not, the idea that there would be millions of migrants coming into Europe from other parts of the world didn't even cross anyone's mind in the 1950s. It wasn't written for that purpose. Now we have that. It's no longer fit for purpose, and something else needs to happen. We need to stop people coming across just claiming asylum in a fashion which is not genuine. We need to stop bogus asylum seekers coming to the country from safe other countries. And then we need to put strict caps on visas for work and for students. Now, a few people coming to work who've got scarce skills, a few people coming to study because they want to come to our great universities, or previously great universities, I should say, because a lot of our universities have now been captured by cultural Marxists and just teach a load of guff. Some people are probably better off staying in Russia or China, to be honest, and where you don't have a culture which is degenerated with all of this nonsense that our culture is. But there you go. Well, our universities still remarkably have a good reputation. Some people want to come and study. I'm sure there are still some good professors around that can benefit some people. And, I don't mind a few people coming from foreign countries to study here, but it should be at the level that we had in the 80s and 90s, where it was a few thousand or a few tens of thousand. They come, they study, and they go home, and they're not competing with British people for places. There's enough good places for British academic students to get a good academic education if that's what they need, and that's going to be good for their future. But they're not forced to go to university or put along this route to go to university when they should actually be out learning a trade and learning the skills to do jobs that we need to do in this country, so that we don't need to bring a constant stream of migrants to the country to be nurses and doctors and plumbers and gas fitters, because we don't skill our own young people. I mean, this is something that's fundamental that has gone very, very wrong in this country, which is being used as an excuse to keep mass rapid immigration going, and it needs to stop. And so those are our policies, and we also need to remigrate foreign prisoners and people who are in the country, who are foreign nationals, who are not benefiting, but who actually take benefits. We've got 1.7 million foreign nationals in the country. This again is from government statistics, not including students or asylum seekers who are here legally but are not working and are taking benefits. And they shouldn't be in the country. There's no reason for 1.7 million foreign nationals to be here taking money from the welfare budget, from the healthcare budget, from the education budget, draining billions of pounds every year from the country's resources and not contributing anything back. So those people need to be remigrated as well, unless they get a job and start a business and start contributing, giving to the country rather than taking from the country. So it's very simple. And that's just what most people think is common sense, unless you're in the uniparty or mainstream media where you scream racist, racist, oh, they're a racist, whenever you don't agree with their position that they want to continue with mass immigration, which leads to these kind of figures that we've got yesterday. This figure that shows that the country now has 68.3 million people officially 15 months ago, and is probably well over 70 million. Completely unsustainable figure for the population of the UK, which is actually more densely populated now. I mean, England is more densely populated now than India, if you can imagine. That's a fact. Looking at the population of just England and the geographical area, astonishing. And it can't continue. So please don't vote for the Uniparty. Don't vote Labour, Tory, Lib Dem, Green. Come and join us in the Heritage Party and we will sort out this massive immigration emergency that we have. Thank you for listening, everybody, and God bless you all.